last presenter is going to be Bereket, my brother Bereket. He's here, and he's going to be introducing himself and also presenting. After that, we're going to break for lunch. So please give my brother Bereket a warm welcome.
All right, thank you everyone for giving me this opportunity. My name is Bereket Stephanoes. Since our last names are our grandfather's names, so people know me as Bereket Stephanoes. And I've been in the justice-seeking camp for a while now, in and out, but mostly in the DC area. All right. Yeah, so the title I was given is The Destabilizing Nature of Shaebia. And I'm sure most of the people who presented before me are envying me because I snagged the easy one. So I can just finish it in 1 minute. Okay, Shaebia, but world peace, regime change. I'm gonna have a seat now. So it's that easy. But in seriousness, I will try to go into the details of what makes us say PFDJ regime or the Shaebia regime is a destabilizing factor or variable in our region and also to the world, and why we need okay. Yeah. So before we go to what makes a regime or a government a destabilizing factor, I would like to go into details. What makes it? What is expected of a regime not to be destabilizing, but to live in peace with its neighbors and like the rest of the world. So there are three. I mean, there are many, but I picked three. Things that a regime must fulfill to do this. They are like respect for sovereignty and rule of law and non-intervention of affairs of countries. Then the next is dialogue and diplomacy and believing in conflict resolution and economic cooperation. And the PFDJ regime fails in all these three. But before I go to what PFDJ did to destabilize the region or the country, as one of the fundamental principles of international relations goes, a government's behavior internally reflects its conduct externally, or vice versa. Like the government will act the way it acts internally when it interacts with the outside world. So I'll just give a dedication of this presentation to those Eritreans whose lives have been destabilized by this regime. And I just collected a few pictures in this presentation that I would like to remember. Lives of Eritreans whose, from I don't know, 30, 40 years, whose lives was destabilized. So I just gathered a few pictures from the internet, and these are names of some people whose lives, let me just read their names. This is Walda Dawit Tamasgan, Abdul Qadir Jalani, Abraham Zare, Takhla Abraham Gabret Bahalabi Walda Maryam, and Haile Karza. The reason that okay. The reason that I brought these names up is, first, these are lives of Eritreans whose that were destabilized by the Eritrean regime, But also what they have in common is their lives were lost outside of Eritrea. This shows like the tentacles of PFDJ reach. Like these are not only the maybe like a handful numbers from those whose lives were lost, but these are lost outside of Eritrea. The security apparatus of this government, even when it was in the position of government, when it was like a front, had tentacles reaching out. So I just wanted to dedicate this, and also Muhammad Ali Ibrahim. This was very recent, actually. And the other thing is, when I was preparing for this presentation, I was just doing final touches, and I looked at a YouTube channel called Ethioforum, and I looked at a news that said Eritrea is printing birr without the knowledge of Ethiopian government. And I have to verify this, but the trend is very, very similar to what was happening in 1990s by the Eritrean regime. So look at this. They are intervening economically in the affairs of a neighboring country. And if you remember at that time, they were also allegedly ranked number 14 in coffee export of the world, while Ethiopia didn't make it. So we can understand that the government also intervenes not only security-wise, but also economically. And we can just, what we learn from here is like there is a trend. They have done this 25 years ago, a quarter of a century ago, and they are doing it now. And it's working for them. So what makes this is like, as a result of this game that they play, unsuspecting people bear the brunt of these rapacious actions and stripped of their means of sustenance, tranquility, and dignified livelihood. And this is not, as I said, this is not a coincidence. It is a testament of a recurring pattern, manifestation of the mindset firmly entrenched in the dogma or modus operandi of zero-sum game. So if we win, you lose, and to win, we have to get rid of you kind of mentality. And this, like the intervention, as I said, is we have to look at it from security point of view first, and also we look at it from economy. So I'll go to, I don't have a lot of data to show, but I have news articles to remind you of the time, and most of the things that I will talk you already know, but to put it together in one will give like a comprehensive action, and we can probably gather a trend out of this. So if you remember this news, former Sudanese leader flees to Eritrea. And I happened to talk in 2001 when I was in Eritrea, somebody who eyewitnessed this, and he said like there was a bewildering incident where like a convoy of land cruisers were like entering Eritrea from the border between Kassala and Tesane, and he was like, what is happening? This is like a car chase. And it ended up being the former Sudanese Prime Minister, Sadat al-Mahdi, were being helped by Eritrean security from home imprisonment in Khartoum and moved to Eritrea. This is like, what is happening? There's a security system inside a country and another country's security system, not only, and I'm not saying like he was a bad guy or a good guy or something, not to make a judgment on his character, but when Eritrean security officers get into Khartoum, the capital of a neighboring country, not abduct because he was willing, but take a person and in a car chase like, this is only in a movie, but this same security apparatus is the one that operates and chases Eritreans because they have this, they have this means, machinations, monetary like capability and all. So it shows how deep it can get into the systems of neighboring countries. And I'll show you another one. Like this is just it amazes me how daring they do things. And then the next thing is at that time Eritrea and Sudan had severed their diplomatic relations. So Eritrea helped create this National Democratic Alliance, if you guys remember it. And nothing wrong with creating alliance of opposition groups, but when you arm them and send them to the neighboring countries to fight and make a war, then that is a problem. So just to remind you, if you remember, this is the guy who was leading the NDA. And I don't know if you can read it at the bottom. Al-Murghani is the leader at that time, and many of you whom remember of NDA. And if you read the last statement, last in this presentation, but this was taken from Sudan Tribune. Al-Murghani briefed the president on NDA's participation, and what is briefing another country's affair to the president? I was like, what is you can see how deep they intervene. And I started this with Sudan, and just to get a pattern. And the other thing that they did with Sudan was arming the opposition groups, that is the SPLA. And we all know, I personally witnessed it in 2003 in Eritrea, that there was a military camp of the SPLA. And this is not judging on the cause why the SPLA was fighting, but on the reason that Eritrea was arming the military wing of that and allowing its base. And if most of you remember the wars in 1997, where Hamish Korab, it's a Sudanese territory, was taken by SPLA, but actually friends of ours of the 5th round of national service participated in that war, and they never surrendered Hamish Korab until 2006 to the government of Sudan. So not only armed, but also participated, taken part. And many people will remember the Togan Wars of April 1997. So we're looking at the organization, the security system getting into a country, allowing the organization to form. And NDA was moved into the former Sudanese embassy. They ousted the embassy and gave the office to the opposition, armed them, and then participated in the war. So this is a destabilizing factor. And I'm by no means fan of the Sudanese regime at that time or its president, but when a country intervenes in another country, then there is something to say. Why do they do this? It's not if it was as a matter of strategy or as a matter of principle, then you can agree or disagree. But what they do is they don't support them to the point that they can win. No, they support them to the point that they can use them as a bargaining chips for the goal. So sometimes they push it and then they withdraw the support. So the opposition groups are being used as a bargaining chip or as tools of aggression. So here's a news item from 2008. The Beja Congress slams the Eritrean negligence because they support them to start an armed conflict, but they don't support them enough to go where they want. So this is a continuous limbo. We will see it in the Ethiopian sense, they form an organization, they support them to a point, and then they do not use them to the cause, but as a bargaining chip to bargain with the government. And the destabilizing variable is to push the government to get them to agree to something. And otherwise we will continue to destabilizing kind of approach. So the next country that I would like to discuss is Ethiopia, just to make sure like I don't want to address from 2018 until now. Not only because there is such a short period of time and it was addressed by many speakers by me, before me, but also the gravity of how Eritrea intervened in Ethiopia and Tigray after 2018. Like the rest of my minutes will not be enough. But let's just say it's bar none. There is no comparison to what Eritrea did in the last 3-4 years in Ethiopia, especially in the Tigray war of the last 3 years. So I'll just go back to the years before that. Here's a news item that I took, and these are like the DEMHIT or TPDM armed forces that Eritrea was supporting. And I was looking at the Somalia-Eritrea Monitoring Group report, and they interviewed their former chairman, and he said, our budget was $450,000 a month, and they said like $30,000 a month, and Eritrea was financing this organization to that extent. Not, as I said, not for them to win, but to just destabilize the regime. So, like in the interest of time, I will not go deeper than that, but there was this organization, TPDM, and the other organization I saw was, this is Alliance for, what was the name? Alliance for, People's Alliance for Freedom and Democracy. And it looks like just one organization, but it was a combination of Benshangul People's Liberation Army, Gambela People's Liberation Army, Ogaden Liberation Front, Sidama National Liberation Front, and the OLF. And by this time, I believe the OLF was disintegrated into 3 or 4 factions. So I think one of the OLFs was being participated. So if you look at the Eritrean government policy, they are destabilizing. One of the core objections, let's say, if they can object, but one of the core disagreements of they had with Ethiopia was the ethnic federalism. But then we look at this, all these new organizations. I mean, the ONLF, the Ogaden, and the Oromo Liberation Front were not new, but the Benshangul and Gambela were created during in Eritrea. So, like, this is a testament of why they create these organizations, to destabilize the regime, not for them to further, because in principle they say they disagree with this ethnic based organization, political organization, but then they support such kind of organizations. So this picture you see was one of the funfair events when they had them in one, and then I think the coalition didn't last long. Another organization that they had was this Gumbot 7 and EPPF military wing when they merged. This is a picture when they merged, but it's Gumbot 7 was a remnant of the Knijit organization. I think portion of them were moved to Eritrea and called themselves Gumbot 7. And EPPF is the Arbenyoch. There was a news audio, and thanks to Amaniel, you have Asena has broadcasted where the chairman of the Gumbot 7 said, like, we have been given almost $500,000 support from Ethiopia, and 200,000 of it was going to be spent on military. This is on audio by the current Minister of Education of Ethiopia. So Eritrea gave $200,000 to spend on military for Gumbot 7. And like there was 200 more for ISAT and 100 more for public diplomacy or something. But the extent that they go to disturb the regime can be seen. And this audio was like one time. We don't know how much, how often they did this kind of things. And the next thing I would like to discuss is the, So what did Gumbot 7 or Arbanyach did? This is kind of a news item from like close to 6 years ago. Here is they attacked TPLF soldiers, it says on the news. And then there was an attack in Arba Minch, Ethiopia. And okay, I'll come back to this. But here is what they're doing is, especially this news item, the Gumbot 7 Arbanyach attacked Arba Minch. Arba Minch is on the south of Ethiopia. It's probably like 400 kilometers north of Kenya. And to have a military activity in that area, we have to assume that they must have come from the southern side of Ethiopia, from Kenya or somewhere in that. So if they come from Kenya, and one of the captured soldiers was interviewed by the Somalia-Eritrea monitoring group, and they said, we have stayed in Kenya. So not only did they stabilize Ethiopia, but also Kenya. So this is Eritrean government acting, destabilizing the region, Ethiopia and Kenya. And the other money that they spent was on ISAT. ISAT, as you can see, was a satellite TV. I believe it's registered in Netherlands, but its main operation was in DC. And to avoid being a hypocrite on my side, it's essential to accommodate the commendable intentions of some of the members of the media. However, the majority of the budget and the majority of the people were trying to spew hate against ethnic groups, and at some point they have openly announced that they will they would like to annihilate the people of Tigray. But who financed this? Eritrean government. And they ended up being the mouthpiece of, as you can see in this image, this is one of their journalists when they visited Eritrea, and they ended up being mouthpieces of Gumbot 7. And this is in itself a destabilizing factor. And like if ISAT is doing in an Ethiopian land, an Ethiopian media, it's not a matter of importance to us, but when Eritrea is financing this, then that is destabilizing. The next is, I mean, I can say a lot about this, but the next is, have you seen this picture before? It was posted on New York Times, and the two soldiers are Eritrean and Djiboutian soldiers on the front line. The distance that they had was like a gun barrel distance. That's how they said it. It's New York Times. What they, this is around 2008. The Djiboutian government was accused of being very pro-Ethiopia, and all the port income that Djibouti was getting was supposed to be for Eritrea if there was no conflict. So some kind of envy, I mean, there is no political term for it, but some kind of envy arose in the ranks of Eritrean government. So what they did, they started a war with Djibouti. And I'll come back to a trend that came with this, but they started a war, and even if they couldn't push or get pushed, the sense that they create, the sense of insecurity that they create could diminish the trade system or like the stability of Djibouti, and that was the intention, I believe. They were not going to go to war with Djibouti when it's getting supported by many. But in that time, they started to support a Djiboutian opposition group, Front pour la Restauration de l'Unité et la Démocratie. I think it's called FRUD. They had a combatant army, and they were trying to support that. So Djibouti, and the next, thing that I would like to speak is Somalia. And there has been many incidents and many documented activities that the Eritrean government did against Somalia. Some of them were couldn't find any proof, but one thing that was undisputed even by government of Kenya was like in November of 2011, a flight came to Baidoa full of armaments, and it was alleged that it came from Eritrea, and there were many evidences, and it was included in the Eritrea-Somalia monitoring group. So I can conclude that there is some kind of threat. You destabilize a nation, you create an opposition group that will start a fight, and also so you destabilize a nation, and people would ask, where did these armed people come from, especially the ones from Ethiopia? And here is another destabilizing factor. During the war of 1998 to 2000, there were Ethiopian soldiers in Eritrea. Some of them voluntarily surrendered, some of them were prisoners of war. So the voluntarily surrendered ones, they were immediately taken into Shaebia near Afabet, and they were made to be distributed in this newly minted Ethiopian opposition groups, either Benishangul or Sidama or Nalef, or like if they are Amara, they would join the Arbenyoch Gumbar. So here is, and then the prisoners of war were not allowed visit of the ICRC, the International Red Cross, until the war ended in 2000. And by then, the preceding 3 years, people out of despair started joining these organizations. And then after the ICRC visit became open, then some of them did return to Ethiopia and some of them remained. But the same thing started to happen when the conflict arose with Djibouti. Djibouti claims even now there are prisoners of war in Eritrea that hasn't been allowed to be accessed by ICRC or other organizations. So treating prisoners of war is one of the Geneva Conventions, rules of war, and here is an incident where it was not respected. So I think in this brief minute I have checked Sudan, Ethiopia, Djibouti, Somalia, and a little bit of Kenya, and I don't have time to list the economic intervention that Eritrea is doing in South Sudan. There is a whole list of things. So it's intervening in all countries' affairs of the region. Guess what? It's doing it in other countries' affairs as well. This is from 2014, and this is a high-level delegation of the Eritrea visiting Crimea in 2014. For this, the Ukrainian foreign minister had posted a protest, a formal protest, but they neglected it because Crimea at that time was just occupied by Russia, and they had to go the other way around and even at that time, it was not even formally joined to Russia. So this is what they do. These are another ones, like the breachmen, there were sailors that were held in Eritrea. And this is actually a good example. I'll come back to it. But there was another incident that we need to mention, and this is the Great Lakes region of Africa, the Congo War. Eritrea participated by providing armaments to Laurent Kabila, and so what we're doing is that we're not judging the justness or not so justness of the causes. We're saying, should a country intervene in other countries' affairs with at least with military? So it wasn't attended. So this is the title that I chose for this one was the Eritrea, the Unattended Menace, or maybe the Phantom Menace for those of you who are Star Wars fans. So this is the, it's not attended. But out of all this, one of the victims, I don't want to say victims, but one of the affected parties attended this in a serious manner, and then they responded. And I'll take you back to this, if you can read this one. When the British sailors were detained in Eritrea, Henry Bellingham, I believe he was the foreign minister at that time, warned Eritrea it would take a robust action if it was not granted consular access. That's when they released them. So every time statements are released, or every time State Department comes up with a report, country report, they don't care. But when you tell them that a robust action is going to be taken on you, that's when they react. They immediately release them, no court, no guilty, not guilty, no mercy, no, just release them immediately. So we can see there is a trend that they respond to. And just to see, this is the integrated country strategy of United States for public release. It was released a little over a year ago, last year. And one of the mission goals was, and as you can see, this was May 5, 2002. And it says, limit Eritrea's ability to undermine the stability of the Horn of Africa. And this is like a year ago. How do you think this fared? I'll let you be the judge. The second is even more funnier, because it says making a kind of pushing or suggesting Eritrea does not object or block US global initiatives. How many votes did Eritrea vote against the US? Had this worked? Or it says negotiated to end a conflict in northern Ethiopia, and then it says countering Russian aggression in Europe. This is even more funnier, because a year later they went the opposite direction and resisting Chinese efforts to dominate the UN. And we cannot say Eritrea was or was not, but their last visit to China, the president's visit to China, was indirect contradiction to this. So what would the United States do when its policies are opposite in this way? Nothing. So, at least for now, we haven't seen anything. But we can suggest a couple of things. And this will be, if I'm taking one, this is I'm on my last conclusion. So I have read quite a few on the situation, on how these things can be handled. The easiest low-hanging fruit that we can ask is, there was a United Nations Security Council resolution 2023 that was issued in 2011. It was, Eritrea was let go from it in 2018 because for good behavior, I believe. But little did we know, it didn't show us that good behavior. So the easiest low-hanging fruit is to ask to get it reinstated. That sanction needs to be reinstated, and that is not a solution by itself, but it's a low-hanging fruit. The next is we should ask the diplomatic movement, the restriction of the movement of their diplomatic bodies. Many countries do it because this destabilizing nature of Eritrea is done and coordinated by the embassies, consular offices, and all. So this needs to be, the restriction of this movement of these diplomatic bodies needs to be controlled. And every country has the right to just not severe diplomatic or something, but just the DC ambassador will only be allowed in the vicinities of his office. like with some miles within office. And that's I believe, not too big to ask. The next is, with all these destabilizing efforts and all these activities that Eritrea does, it's an anomaly that Eritrea is a member of the United Nations Human Rights Commission. It's like it decides on issues, and it's funny. Russia was a member until very recently, and the United Nations senators discussed it, and it was removed. Eritrea is worse. It needs to be removed because these kind of platforms allow it for it to make statements and to appear. The platform is in itself an activity that needs to be addressed. The next is the mining companies. If they are not, this was also part of the monitoring group activity that it was doing. The mining companies proceeds. We need to make sure that it's not spent on abusing the people. So some kind of monitoring thing, like sourcing all these mines that came from Eritrea, and especially just like what they do with blood diamonds, right? So it needs to be some kind of determination needs to be made, and it goes without saying we should demand the release of all political and faith-based prisoners, and all this will not help. All this will just help our struggle, our wave to come to some kind of platform and move to the next level. The key solution is regime change. The regime change needs to be. If I have not taken much of your time, I appreciate the chance that you've given me.
I have a question.
Okay.
Hi, Hanna Haptu here. So I'm wondering, when there was the coalition of oppressed peoples of Ethiopia, why was Tigray not part of that?
Can you say that again?
How you brought up the coalition of oppressed people in Ethiopia, how you brought up the Gambela people, the Oromos, what have you. Why was Tigray not included in that? Why are they not working with them?
That's a good question. These people the army people that you see is Demhit, I think, Democraciawi Minkasas Hizb Tigray. The people that I brought are those political organizations funded by Eritrean government and acting against the state of Ethiopia. Some of them have, like, I am a huge supporter of the Oromo rights for their self-determination, and so is the Tigray people. And the oppression is real, and some kind of struggle within the bounds of civility is necessary. Why Eritrea did not include with the Tigray fighters with the rest of the Ethiopian fighters, I can only guess, just like you. It's a strategy that they did, and some people say that TPDM itself didn't choose. Some of them say if they unite, it will have another impact. We can only guess, but the oppression in Ethiopia, although different than the one in Eritrea, there was, and it affected everybody in Ethiopia according to. Does that help? Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bereket. This was really an amazing presentation. We appreciate you.